So when we talked last in September, you were in just getting started on this thing.
Yeah.
And so how quickly did this book come together? You talked about you were working on it at the time. I remember that.
Yeah.
We went from working stage to you've got damn near a whole launch now together.
hmm
How quickly did that come together, and what was the process like for you putting that book together?
Well, it was a complete learning curve. I've never done anything like anything that I'm doing now. So I had so much to learn. And that was part of what helped really launch me into being so much happier too, because learning for me, just that concept of lifelong learning, soaking up webinars and, listening to podcasts and reading new material and watching new videos and learning from other people in aspired spaces that I'm trying to get into just lit a fire in me. So I was so motivated to figure this out. But I have to say that writing the book, it was hard. There were a lot of stories that I wanted. I knew I had something to say, but there were a couple of reasons that it was difficult for me personally. One was that A, had never done it before, wasn't really sure how to approach it, what the best methods would be, but I figured that out. And then also that I was living this story as I was writing it. So it was difficult to pinpoint what my real message was, how to write that down so people would grasp what I was trying to say because I was still going through the motions and the emotion of making this all happen for myself. So in the book, I mean, I was writing up until the pandemic was happening. I actually finished writing the book during the pandemic, and that makes an appearance in the book. So it all has happened, I guess, in the grand scheme very quickly. But I had actually started writing down these stories and just putting together some Google Docs. In the spring of last year. So I had started it before I left CBS because I knew it was something I wanted to do. And then once I finally left TV, was able to organize everything. And that I think was the hardest part of it, organizing my thoughts in a way that would, if you'd never met me before, make sense to you. If
Right.
you had no idea what my background was, am I putting things down in a way that you're going to understand who I am and where I'm coming from? And that turned out to be a really difficult thing for me to figure out. Thank God for editors. So my editor was really, I give her so much credit for helping me organize the thing and just put it together in a way that was going to make sense to everybody.
So in the process that you're putting this together,
hmm
and it's evolving because it was almost like a real time scenario
Yeah.
where you not only are, and you mentioned you started doing this before you left, so you're still getting up, and everyone remembers the schedule. The
hmm
insane schedule is one of the things that a lot of the feedback I got about episode 102 was, oh my God, how do they do that? My mom, I told you,
Yeah.
my mom still asks me the question, the random points where I got to do early mornings is that how do you do that? How do you manage it with sleep? So, in the midst of your sleep schedule, which was just all sorts of just a kerfluffle of everything,
Good
doing
word.
all this, it's the best. See, I have the best words. So it's like I,
I
I
think
come.
someone would differ with you on that.
Those are some of the conversations we have off the microphone. It's just
Right,
like,
right,
the it was a kerfluffle of sorts that you have
right.
trying to keep all this together. You're writing this book and still going in every morning
Yeah.
and doing this work, and you weren't happy. And I've seen you sent me some of the advanced stuff on this book before, and there's a little bit of it that we'll kind of talk about as we go along with this too. You're doing all this while you're not happy at this job, so there's some evolution happening as you're going along in the book.
Absolutely. And that's actually part of the reason that to me, I kind of wanted to have this done and out by April. That's obviously not happening. And COVID was part of that. But the other part of it was I got stuck. I did get, the traditional writer's block about 75% of the way through because again, I was living it as I was writing it. So it was really like writing in a journal, writing in a diary, and trying to analyze what I was going through and put that to paper proved really, really tricky for some reason. So here we are now in July, and it's months after I wanted this to really happen, but it is now, but you're right, like living through that schedule while still writing this, I got to say, like the motivation just came from knowing at that point by the spring of last year, I knew that I was going to be making this big change. Nobody else knew it yet but me and my husband. And I had that internal pilot light lit at that point of this flame burning inside me. Not to get too symbolic, but it was like a real kick in the ass that um, things are going to be changing. There is an endpoint on the calendar at this point, and I knew when that was going to be. And I had so much energy and motivation because of it. You know, before I had the knowledge and the definite I knew definitely that I was going to be leaving TV. um I was just miserable and going through the motions every day and just trying, literally just trying to get through until 12:27 p.m. when I get to bolt out the door and drive out the parking lot home like a bat out of hell. I was so miserable every single day at that job, and then when this light at the end of the tunnel finally appeared, I had something to live for. Not to sound dramatic, but um, it was like I knew things were going to be better. I knew I had something that I was working toward at that point and was able to find the energy because of that to work so hard in my off hours to begin to pursue some of it.
And that comes through in some of the thing, a lot of what you've written, obviously. I've got my iPad up here. People can, I mean, notice on the screen, I'm kind of looking a little down off to the corner.
Your
There's a,
advanced copy?
I've got it, my advanced copy in front of me, and there's a story here, and I want to read an excerpt of this, or an expert, whichever, or read an excerpt of this. When
Do
told you, I
what you
got the
meant.
best. I told you, I'm all tongue tied right now. It's everything here. But this story really jumped off to me, kind of it gives a door into what you were dealing with. This was the morning, I think it was either the Preakness or the Belmont
Mm,
that you talked about from last year, and how little by little everything was getting to you. It was just like one thing. This is 2018, so it's like everything is kind of getting to you and it's starting to add up. So it's like I look at it like this. It's the After angrily toasting two blueberry waffles for them, your two little girls, and by the way, those girls couldn't be cuter if they tried. I I slammed my butter knife down and went out on the deck for peace and quiet. Now, surely the bird song, the sweet grassy smell, and a big old brew from the Keurig would perk me up. My husband Steve, who had sleepily made his way down to the kitchen, knew something was wrong. He awkwardly made side glances at me, trying to figure out where my mood was coming from. When I had days like this, he usually kept his distance. Didn't say much to me, and I preferred it that way. But this time he tried to gently help me feel better. He opened the door onto the deck so our blonde haired girls could rush out to see me. And besides the cats, no one has ever shown me such unconditional love. These tiny people put up with me at my most scatterbrained, exasperated, and frustrated. They just loved me no matter what. And as they toddled over to give me a snuggle, my tears welled up in the half hearted embrace I mustered up in return. So, this was the morning
mhm.
of one of the Triple Crown races. And
Yeah.
you were supposed to be going to a party. Because, people, obviously, I'm not a big horse racing guy, but I know the Derby, the Belmont, the Preakness, those are big deals.
Yeah.
And you pretty much you were not, as the vernacular of the youngsters, you were not with the shits that particular day.
No.
And you just were not there.
Right.
So kind of go a little bit more into that, because this sounds like one of those breaking point type of moments that a lot of us have in a lot of different places. And reading this, I'm just getting this mental image of what that morning was like for you.
Yeah. So it was one of those classic woke up on the wrong side of the bed type of mornings. And I wanted nothing to do with anybody just from the second that I woke up. And I had no reason for it. That was what was one of the biggest clues to me that something was wrong and I needed to fix it. I was just in this terrible mindset where I was restless and angry and frustrated and just felt like I couldn't do anything right, that I was an uncaring spouse, that I wasn't a good parent, that I wasn't showing up for my kids, that I was invisible in my job. I just felt like everything in the world was against me. And I know that sounds really self-pitying, and it is, but it's what I felt. And I was just in this depressive slump. That was one of the worst days of my entire life. In fact, it may be the worst day that I can remember having, because I was just so miserable. And knowing that we had made these plans to go hang out with friends. It was supposed to be this awesome day of, horse racing and margaritas, because it was also Cinco de Mayo that day. They coincided that year, and mint juleps, although I probably wouldn't have drank one of those because I think they're nasty. But it was supposed to be this really fun day, and I shit all over it because I felt like crap. And I felt, I mean, aside from just feeling the way I did from the moment I woke up, I felt so horrible because I ruined the day for myself, for my family. And I sat up in my room with the shades drawn. It was a really nice day, as I recall. And I like just prayed that this feeling would pass, and it never did. And I'm like, something has got to give here. This is not right. This is not who I am. What the hell is wrong with me? And that plus one other day that I talk about in the prologue where I really felt like that I hit bottom turned me to Google to figure out that there's something wrong with me. I got to go to the doctor about this. I figured I either must have clinical depression, I must have late onset postpartum, I must need therapy. Like there's something here that has to be addressed, medically speaking. And it did end up turning out that I presented my doctor with what was going on, and we agreed together that we should medicate the problem. So she put me on antidepressants a couple days per month because the way the timing worked out, it was like PMS to the extreme for me, that I would get into these moods that I could not break myself from leading up to the day, in the days leading up to my period. And there is this thing called premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is basically, again, PMS on steroids. It's
Jeez.
like this overwhelming swing in your mood and your emotions. And I figured that that must be the problem. And that if I started taking this medication, that it would fix itself. Unfortunately, it didn't. Um, the medication is still there if I do need it. Thankfully, I haven't had to take it very often at all since I left TV, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But um, what I really needed was a life shift. I needed to fix what was going on in my situation. And that meant taking back control of my life on a variety of levels, physically, mentally, just, I mean, you know this, I was controlled down to the length of my hair working
Oh,
at the
absolutely.
station, and and I'd had it. I finally just, there was this proverbial straw that finally broke the camel's back for me. And I decided it was time to make a choice. And that choice was, and it was terrifying, to leave a career that I had built for 15 years and go rogue completely on a new path. Yes, using some of the skill set that I have, most of it, but in a direction that took me away from a 401k, from a salaried job, still with a mortgage to pay and car payments and mouths to feed. So it was really, really scary, but it was the best choice I've ever made in my life.